Well, all right, we're on part three now of our "The Lord Is My Shepherd" series. In part one of the series, I mentioned that through the lamb story by the Reverend Canon David C. Anderson, God helped me understand what He sees when He looks at me. And I'd like to share that story with you today. And the Reverend Canon David C. Anderson is a retired president of the American Anglican Council, was a member of the Episcopal Church for 62 years, and was an ordained Episcopal minister for 35 years before leaving the Episcopal Church. He's now an Anglican. Uh, he wrote this story in 2006, some 34 years after the events he described. It's called The Lamb Story. It says, most of us have trouble remembering what we were doing on a particular day, even months ago. But now, 34 years later, a particular Sunday afternoon in March of 1972 still stands out in my memory. March of that year found me completing my first year as rector of St. Mary's Church in Malta, Montana. Actually, I was the rector of two other churches as well, St. Matthew's, Glasgow, and All Saints at Scobie. That happened because the then Bishop of Montana had convinced a very young priest in the Diocese of Washington, D.C., that if being rector for one church was good, being a rector of three was three times better. So I found myself starting my second year of residence on the Great Plains, but still with much of the mindset of an East Coast urban dweller. Culture shock was going from the nation's capital to a lovely ranching town of 2,000 souls under the big sky of Montana. A parish member, Harold, was always looking for ways to build a better understanding of the country and people into this new young priest. On a particular Sunday in March, he wanted to drive me to a sheep ranch south of Malta to show me what a ranch looked like during the lambing season. We drove 30 miles under a stormy March sky and arrived at a large ranch where a Basque family cared for sheep in the tens of thousands. Harold had called ahead and told the family that he was bringing his priest down and asked them to show us their lambing operation. As we got out of Harold's pickup, someone in an old, warm-looking coat came over to greet us and welcome us. Spread out over several acres were 4 or 5 steel warehouse buildings, each seemed to hold several thousand sheep. Our guide explained that the sheep outside were watched closely during the lamb time, and when the ewes were about ready to give birth, they were brought into the shelter of one of these large sheds. As we walked toward the door of one of the buildings, I saw something that I was not prepared to see, and for which I had no frame of reference to deal with. I was city raised, and I have always heard ranch life was hard. Now I was seeing firsthand that ranch life was really hard. I could tell that the economy was bottom line financial viability preceded sentiment when it came to livestock. As we came to the door, we passed by a large heap of dead lambs, at least 50, and perhaps 100, and all were missing their fleece. The pile of small lambs was 10 to 12 feet across and 4 feet high, and their poor little blood-stained bodies were already hard in the chill Montana March air. Of course lambs die. I knew that. Sheep seemed to die too easily, more easily than other livestock. It would be expected that some would die in birth or from disease, all cooped up as they were in large numbers in these sheds. But was bottom line profits so important that they need to skin the poor little things to make an extra dollar on such a small fleece? My urban mind raced ahead, already passing judgment on the practice. I was upset, offended, and feeling argumentative over this. As we went into the relative warmth of the building, I turned and asked, "So what's with the pile of lambs?" The guy kept talking as he walked into the pen, and he said, "Lots of these ewes give birth to twins. And for some reason, known only to God, they will reject one and keep the other. Nothing we can do change their mind. If we were a small farm, we might bottle feed the rejected lambs, or one of the kids might take a bum lamb as a 4-H project and raise it. But that won't work here. We have hundreds of bum lambs, and we can't afford to lose all of them just because their mamas don't want them." Passing an enclosure with just a ewe, one lamb beside her and another pinned in a corner, we came next to a solitary ewe. This one lost her lamb after it was born. It's one of those in the pile you ask about. Sometimes they just die. So we have a ewe without a lamb in one pen and a rejected lamb in the next. But a ewe will only nurse its own. It will not accept another ewe's lamb. That's why the dead animals are missing their fleece, he said. When one dies, we take the fleece off, cut leg holes in the fleece, and put it on the rejected lamb. We take some of the blood from the dead lamb and rub it on the forehead of the abandoned lamb. And then we take it to the ewe that lost her lamb. She smells the fleece and recognizes the fleece as her own. She sees the blood on the lamb's head and licks it off, and she can taste the scent of her own body in the blood of her lamb. She cleans the new lamb and claims it as her own and lets it suckle. And in a day or two, her milk passes through the body of the new lamb, giving it the scent and taste of the mother, and the adoption is complete. I left the ranch overwhelmed by the experience of death and life and the sheer number of sheep being cared for. And even with the good of the adoption, I felt sorry for the abandoned lambs and all the death. It made my calling as shepherd of 3 small Montana congregations look so much more manageable, so much more enjoyable. It was some years later during the Easter season that I saw our story in the lambs. It was the image of Christ as the knowledgeable shepherd, and Christ as the dying lamb offering his fleece, and God the Father as a mother sheep who looks at you and me, wrapped in the fleece of Jesus Christ, and with the blood of the lamb covering the stain of our estrangement from God. When God the Father looks upon you and me, it is a wrapping of Jesus he sees. As St. Paul put it, put on Christ Jesus. And the blood and the salty taste of the blood is the same blood shed on Calvary. And God sees his own and claims his own, and we become his own by adoption and grace. Let us pray. Lord God, our holy creator, thank you for the lessons and the wonders of your creation. Thank you for giving us Christ Jesus as our shepherd. Thank you for loving us and rescuing us from our sin through the blood of your Son. And thank you for adopting us as sons and daughters, that we may dwell in your house with you forever. Amen.
Amen.